Do all comedians have ADHD? Well, that's a question I put to my guest, Scottish comedian, TV producer and radio host, Julia Sutherland. And what do you think she says? Well, let's jump into the video and find out, shall we? Welcome back, I'm Gordon Brown, and today I think we will be having a laugh or two, because today I'll be joined by Scottish comedian, TV producer and radio host, Julia Sutherland. Welcome, Julia.
Thank you very much for having me, Gordon.
It's great to see you here, and I'm so happy that you've come on to the podcast. I was driving home the other week and I was just thinking about how did I get you here, and driving home, I think I was coming home from the gym, and listen to Radio Scotland.
You just want to show off that you were at the gym, don't you? That's the whole point of this.
Yes, so I've been going to the gym religiously.
Well done.
Been once. Went to the gym and I'm on my way home. Heard you talk, I can't remember what the show was.
It was the good, the bad and the unexpected.
Yes, and you said something about, I've got ADHD, blah, blah, blah. And I just, my antennae just shot right up. I had to pull over. Julia Sutherland's got ADHD. And then what I did next was, right, I'm going to go and check out her social media. And sure enough, there you were, blethering
moaning about
your ADHD
yeah.
And your sort of medication and the whole journey. Mm-hmm. So it's great to have you here. And I'm sure you'll let us know a lot about your experience, which will be of great help to others. But I want to just kind of wind back a wee bit and think about your sort of early life, early career, getting into comedy. What was the journey to that?
Well, basically, I was, at the time, I was the producer and co-host on Fred Macaulay's morning radio show on BBC Radio Scotland. And we were doing an item about this comedy competition called Funny Women, which is for new female acts. And the organisers were on as guests. And they were trying to encourage anyone listening, you know, to enter and just generally having a chat about it. And I flippantly said, oh yeah, quite fancy doing that, you know, doing stand-up. So when we came off air, the producer said, right, we've signed you up for the competition. We're going to do it as like a stunt for the show. And I was like, what? You just need to write 5 minutes of, you know, material. But we'll do it, you know, we'll do various different little features in the run up to it, and we'll get you to get help from other comics and stuff like that. So I did that, and I'd done quite a lot of acting in the past, but I'd never done anything like that before. So I did the competition. It was recorded. So my first ever stand-up, you know, some of it was played on the radio, which is horrifying when I think back now, like, you know, when I was at my most inexperienced. But I won the heat and got through to the semi-finals. So it was, you know, it's all good fun. Yeah. But, you know, really caught the bug. And it was just a really good fit for me.
And have you always been funny, like growing up?
I was actually quite shy until I was in my kind of teens, really. And I sort of went to a drama class at the RSND, which is a conservatoire now, which kind of brought me out of my shell. But I was a chubby child and always felt like an outsider. And so it's a bit of a defense mechanism to be funny, to be the funny one, because if you're making jokes about yourself, being self-deprecating, whatever, then you get in there before other people do. I think that's quite a common tale for comedians. Yeah. So I wasn't necessarily class clown, but I was always like doing mad things and telling stories. And I've always been really like obsessed with storytelling, you know, and hearing stories. And that's the sort of basis of your comedy is storytelling? Yeah, it's sort of confessional, storytelling style. It's not like joke, you know, it's not like one-liners. It's much more kind of observational, you know, reflections on my own experiences, stories, that kind of thing. So partly because, I mean, my memory is terrible, you know, so...
Your short-term working memory?
Well, no, all my memory is terrible.
Really?
Yeah. I really don't remember big chunks of my life, to be honest with you. Wow. And
that's actually quite a common thing. People say that
yeah,
they can't really remember much of their childhood. It just seems to have disappeared.
yeah, I really don't remember a great deal. I have got sort of like certain memories that are burnt in, and again, I'm not entirely sure if I really do remember them. You know, it's just like moments, you know, and a general feeling. And I'm really, really bad with faces and names and stuff. So I'll maybe get a feeling like someone looks familiar, but I've absolutely no idea how I know them or what their name is, or that's quite stressful.
So I'll be instantly forgettable then.
No, but that's the thing. People think you're being rude, and it's not. It's just that my brain doesn't seem to hold on to that. It doesn't seem to be able to hold on to that kind of information. So I don't know whether it's like
but as
part of the ADHD.
Doing the acting stuff and obviously learning
Having
your
to learn
material.
lines. Yeah.
How does that go for you?
Yeah, well, I used to be a bit better at learning lines because I mean I was in plays and stuff and I could do that, but I had to do it all really, really last minute. So I could fill my head up last minute and then I would hold it for a short period of time, and then once it was done, it would go immediately. And all my exams were like that. I could never, you know, do anything unless there was a lot of pressure and there was a crushing deadline. So that's how I did all my exams, and that's how I did, you know, learn lines, and everything was last minute. Very stressful for other people as well when they're relying on you to remember stuff. So with stand-up, you know, you'll write your set on your hand or whatever, or I've got, you know, notes on my phone, and I just have to use that. I've sort of written that into, and now that I'm perimenopausal, my memory's even worse than it was. So I've sort of written that into my most recent solo show.
So that like, I kind of refer to that as a lack of automation or activation when it comes to starting things. Like waiting to the guns to your head before you actually do something.
Yeah. And I think it's like you need to have the sort of adrenaline which like flicks the switch to actually get you to focus. And then once I'm focused, I'm unstoppable. Yeah. You know, but unfortunately it's very difficult to get to that point. And as you say, that the thing I find very difficult is starting things and transitions. So like I'll pull up in my car outside my flat and then I'll sit in my car for an hour before I'll come on, get out the door, do nothing. Yeah. I do find going from one thing to another thing difficult.
Have you asking anyone with ADHD, why do you put things off to the last minute? Why don't you just do it in good time? The answer is always
you just can't.
Can't?
Yeah, just can't. You can't get your brain to settle on it, you know? Yeah. It's like the reason that I was at university, I started off doing one course and then I changed to, and in my first year I was doing, it was supposed to be like politics and psychology. It was at Strathclyde Uni, but you did like 5 subjects, you did them all equally. So I did politics, psychology, business law, Italian and calculus. Right. That's a really normal mix of things. Because I had lots of different interests and I was like, ooh, that and that and that. And I love maths, and I really do actually love maths. Do you? Yeah. I love how it's like, I love puzzles. I love solving problems and solving puzzles. That's like totally my thing. And in maths, once you learn how to do something, then you can actually get like a concrete answer. There's no bullshit, there's no waffling. You know, it's like, it's very comforting. I find very relaxing, very calming. But so I was doing the arts degree, and then at the end of the first year I changed to law, to do LLB. I don't really know why. I think my mum wanted me to. And I was like, whatever, change.
How far down the road did you get with that?
So I did 2 years of that. But I got to the point where I would have to do a whole year's worth of studying the night before the exam, which became increasingly impossible. So I had a couple of resits, and I was trying to study for my resit, and I was reading the page of the textbook or whatever, and I read the page, and I was like, I did not take any of that in. I was like, come on, focus. And I read it again, and I was like, oh my God, I didn't take any of that in again. It was like there was something broken in my head, and I just closed the book and I was like, that's it, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. And I called the university and just dropped out because my brain I just wasn't interested. And if I'm not interested in it, I can't force myself to do it unless, you know, there's a gun held to my head. But even then.
Was there a sense of relief that came?
Oh, tremendous. Great. It was fantastic. I love quitting. It's so much fun.
But how long will it be then before you need to do something else?
Well, you know, actually figuring out what to do next, and the sort of mild panic is quite motivating and is quite, to me, I quite like that feeling, you know, because it helps you, it's like a drug, you know, that makes you focus. So, you know, I'm very resourceful, you know, I figured something else out. I ended up actually going, I had a couple of jobs anyway, which I just sort of went full time to earn more money, and then ended up going over to America as a nanny, and then ended up staying there for 7 years and taught snowboarding in the winter, and I would come back in the summer.
As you do.
Yeah, and worked at the BBC in radio production in the off season. So I had this life that was really, looking back on it, really good for somebody with ADHD, because it was constantly changing. It was constant novelty, you know, so I didn't have time to get bored of something, because as soon as I was, you know, getting to the point where I might start to get bored, it was changing. You know, it was like literally flying across the Atlantic and doing something totally different, and then changing. And every day is different, you know. So it was good. It worked quite well for me.
It's interesting that you have a background in TV and production. You may not be surprised to hear that we see tons of folk in TV, film industry.
I think it's because we're probably drawn to the industry because it is different all the time. So it kind of provides you with that. And there's also the added kind of pressure and deadlines, constant deadlines, which really help. And we tend to thrive more in those kind of environments. Anything that's too much the same every day, going in, clocking in, doing the same thing, just can't do that. Absolutely can't do that. So, and you probably find a lot of performers as well, because you get that kind of switch with the adrenaline. It almost functions in the same way as our medication does.
Yes, lots of them come here too.
So, you know, I sort of joke on stage about, I think I'm the only comedian with ADHD. Like, nothing could be further from the truth, you know.
Do you think that is almost like, there's a book called All Dogs Have ADHD? I'm just wondering.
All comedians have ADHD?
All comedians have ADHD?
Probably, yeah, most of them. I would say probably the majority. Yeah, certainly a much, much higher percentage than the, you know, normal population.
And growing up in Glasgow, we have our fair share of comedians here. How much did growing up in this wonderful city influencing your comedic style?
I don't know. I couldn't tell you directly. I'd say that I think Glaswegians are brilliant storytellers. And can be very candid, and you know, we love hearing about misfortune and things going wrong, and you know, like that's just like yes, you know, that's the funniest stuff, isn't it? And that's the kind of comedy that I enjoy. I like it when it's true, and it's about you know, something ridiculous happening or whatever. That's the best. So there's maybe, I think probably that seeps into my. I feel very Glaswegian, you know. I feel very connected to this city. I love Glasgow, and I love the vibe and the, you know, a lot of the other comedians. But I think in terms of like, at the same time, I also feel like a bit of an alien. You know, I've never really felt like I fitted in anywhere, even though I do feel Glaswegian, and I feel very protective.
What's that about, do you think?
I think it's being different, but not necessarily knowing why. You know, now I know that I have ADHD. It sort of explains a lot, because a lot of the things I found so difficult were the things that people found so easy, and yet there would be things that I found so easy that other people were like, how, you know, I could never do that, and you're just sort of like, what, you know, and you just think, you're like, there's something wrong with me, you know, and also finding like social situations. You know, I never liked anything like Hindus and, you know, big parties and stuff. I always found quite difficult. I was always more of a one-on.
What's your social battery like in those instances?
You know, it's not. I am social, and I really I love people, and I love being out and about and doing stuff, and you know, but I could be overstimulated, and I think looking back, I realised that now I have a lot of really intense relationships. I like things to be really intense, and you know, and noise and stuff like that. I'm very sensitive to that. I find it, you know, like just exhausting being in a situation where, because I can hear everything and I can hear every conversation and my brain's like trying to tune into it all, and it's just very difficult. So that's why I've sort of ended up gravitating towards being a bit more of a, not a loner. I mean, I wouldn't describe myself as a loner, but I sort of one at a time.
Yeah.
I
was speaking to a guy yesterday, doing a review with him, and I'd never met him before. And I think he was 52, and he's recently been diagnosed. Mm-hmm. And he was saying that he's like 6 months down the line, and he's saying he's beginning to discover who he actually is, because he felt that up until the diagnosis, a lot of what went before didn't make much sense to him, and he's trying.
Because he was masking.
Yeah, he said that.
Well, I think all of this is really interesting. I'm still kind of trying to figure out what I think and how I feel about it, because there's part of me that thinks that, so, this is what I say, on stage is like, I just got diagnosed with ADHD, and it's funny because like all my life I thought I had a personality, and it turns out I just had symptoms, and trying to unpick like what parts of who I thought I was are me, and what are just a result of my brain, and my ADHD. And I mean, I think to a certain extent everybody is just a result of their brain chemistry, and that's what your personality is, and so there's no need to unpick it, because having ADHD is actually who you are. It definitely, you can give yourself a bit of a break once you know the things that you could, rather than beating yourself up, why can't I do this, why can't I do that?
Do you give yourself a break?
I have been trying to a bit more. That's been probably one of the benefits of getting the diagnosis, is going, you can cut yourself a little bit of slack and go, it's not because you're useless, it's not because you're lazy or stupid, it's because your brain actually just can't do things like that, What was that like before, though, when you didn't know it was ADHD? Horrible. Yeah, I mean, you spend your whole life feeling like a failure, feeling like you're a disappointment, like, you're never living up to your potential. And that's, pretty devastating, especially when you get to, I'm in my late 40s. To have lived my whole life feeling that way about myself. I feel really sad. There was a sort of grief that came. This is a hilarious podcast. You're like, we're going to have some laughs today. And I'm like, it felt like someone died. No, but there was a kind of grief about the life that, like, feeling really almost like resentful that I'd lived my whole life not realizing that I was operating with one hand tied behind my back, and in a way, like I could have, it didn't need to be that way, or even if nothing else changed, if I'd have just known, then I might have been kinder to myself, and maybe other people might have been a wee bit more understanding.
And I'll just assume you're obviously an intelligent person, and again, having met thousands of folk over the year. As one woman said to me, she was doing a PhD, said there are pros and cons to being intelligent. I said, what do you mean? I'd never heard that before. She said, well, the more intelligent you are, the further down the line you get. But the further down the line you get, the more collateral damage is. And also, when you're...
Well, yeah, that's a definite massive thing of like, because I hate saying this because it makes it sound like I'm bragging, but I do score well on IQ tests. And I have been, in that way, supposedly have high intelligence. But I think that does help you to mask, for, as you say, for longer. And also, I think you tend to be more of an overthinker as well. So it's you torture yourself more.
But with the intelligence comes the expectation.
Yeah, like, why can't I do this?
And when you can't deliver on it, you probably beat yourself up even more.
Yeah, absolutely. It was like, I did well enough in my exams because I could pull it out the bag at the last minute, and get an A for something, having not done anything, the whole year practically, because I had, I could do that.
I never liked people like you.
No, I know, but it wasn't much fun. It was really stressful. But when it came to then, so, I could like get into law, for example, but then you need to sort of sit and just learn all these cases and dates and things like that, which you couldn't do. And you're like, oh no, what was the point of that? Like, it's like you feel like you maybe cheated your way onto something and you're going to get found out. But yeah, you do feel sort of like you are getting away with it.
Yes, So that
you're any moment you're gonna get found out, and it's all gonna come crumbling down, and you keep getting away with it because because the pressure forces you to be able to focus when it matters, for the most part. But it's not sustainable.
But most people with ADHD don't look at the evidence, though. The evidence probably points to the opposite, where actually, no, you are quite good, you are very good, but there's this niggle at the back of your mind that somebody's going to tap you on the shoulder, tell you rubbish.
But also you feel like you could do so much better.
Yeah.
Because you can't ever do anything unless it's the last minute. You're like, if I could just do the thing that everybody else seems to be able to do.
Put your clothes away.
Yeah, then I would be achieving my full potential, If I could actually steadily work throughout, I could be doing so much more, and I'm not, and so I'm not fulfilled as a human. And that, I think, is been the overriding feeling that I've had my whole life, is sort of feeling a sense of like, I'm not doing what I could be doing so much more. I could be achieving so much more, and I'm not, and it's really, really frustrating.
And that won't be withstanding
like
all the
like
good
walking
stuff.
through treacle, that's what it feels like.
Yeah. And that is universal, I think. Particularly, I think, as adults who, they could be happily married, have a great job, kids, pets, whatever, seem to do well in their career. There's something within them that still says there should be more to me.
Yeah. I could do more, I could do more, I could do more. Yeah. It's because when you get, and I think that is the key thing that I've been trying to sort of say to myself over the last year or so is, but nobody can operate at their full potential all the time. Nobody does. No. Just because the problem is that when I'm operating at my full potential, like what I can do is remarkable, and so I feel like, why am I not doing that all the time? Yeah. But nobody does that all the time. No. Nobody is, everyone gets into the zone, and everybody, is occasionally brilliant. Nobody's brilliant all the time.
Have moments.
Yeah, but you know what I mean? Like, it ebbs and flows, and that's natural. But I think we put a lot more pressure on ourselves because you see it, and when you get in the zone, you're like, why can't I access this all the time? And I really thought, after I got the diagnosis, I was like, this is it, the medication's going to switch that on, so I'll have more control over that, and I'll be able to do that. Unfortunately, that's not worked out.
Medication, even if it does work well for you, people's expectations of what it's actually going to do is often off the scale.
I think it works a lot better for young people.
It's a lot. Depends.
Not women who are also perimenopausal, who've got other stuff going on. Yeah, you're really up against it. It sort of feels like it's maybe a bit too late. Uh-huh. I have gotten to a point now where I've kind of worked out a kind of strategy to use the medication where it is sort of helpful. Well, it's better than nothing.
Yeah.
But the problem is as well, I think the expectation thing with medication is like it solves one problem, but it doesn't solve all the problems, and it's the emotional dysregulation, which I find is a really big part, and especially when you get into perimenopause as well, and you've got hormones coming into play, it's like, it's off the scale, and you become so unbelievably sensitive, and the medication's not that, it doesn't do anything for that. So, and that's something that you need to learn to manage, and that's something that really affects the people around you as well.
We've been talking about it a lot more in the service about how to support people over and above medication. Mm-hmm. Because medication, I see, it'll get you to the starting line. You then need to run your race. And if you've never run that race before, you need to learn the ropes. Yeah. And the problem with ADHD is you want it all, and I want it now, but you need to take an incremental approach to it. And that is what's really difficult for people with ADHD.
Yeah, we're very all or nothing people. Yeah. And it's like, rather than doing couch to 5K, I'd never run before. I was like, I'll do a half marathon, and that's what I do everything. So, and you want it all immediately. Yeah. Patience is not one of our strong suits.
No. But so with ADHD then being mid-40s, you said?
Yeah, mid-40s. Late 40s.
Sorry, late 40s. What was the trigger to go, right, what is this? I need to get it sorted out.
It was probably being in perimenopause and that amplifying my symptoms to the point that life just became impossible, like impossible. Right. Like with work, I would have editing to do, for example. I had to sort of listen to something, do edit notes, and I would need to have it done for, say, the next day at 9 a.m. and I would start at the beginning of the day and I'd go, right, this is going to take me a few hours, whatever. And I would be just incapable of focusing until 4 or 5 in the morning, you know, when I was like, this needs to be done by 9 a.m.
Yeah.
And I could not even start it until then. And then it would take me a couple of hours.
Yeah.
And I'd think, why am I doing this just now? I could have done this, you know, but I just couldn't. All the things that in the past I could sort of push myself through, I just couldn't push myself through anymore. The emotional dysregulation, as I say, the kind of, you know, how that was impacting on relationships.
So would you go from like 0 to 100 quite quickly?
Oh yeah, like out of control. And in part, I think quite a lot of that is perimenopause rather than ADHD, but it was always there. And it's just sort of like, it made a problem a much, much bigger problem, you know, something that was already a problem. Yeah.
So it's interesting because ADHD is considered like a neurodevelopmental condition. Mm-hmm. And we're seeing women coming forward for the first time in their 40s, 50s, you know, coming for an assessment for ADHD. They'd never given it any thought at all before then. But
well, it's also because I don't think we ever thought that it was something that it was naughty little boys that had ADHD. And I guess I just didn't realise actually all the breadth of the symptoms and the fact that it didn't necessarily always present in the same way. Yeah. And it's just not been something that we've been as aware of in this country, I don't think, as much as in other countries.
Well, it's probably still the same because the women in this country, when they go to their GP to ask about possible, you know, assessment for ADHD, when the GP goes through their symptoms, they will invariably leave the appointment with an antidepressant medication.
Oh yeah. Oh, I got prescribed antidepressants, yeah.
And
several times.
It may help with the mood at that particular time, but it doesn't address what the underlying problem was. Yeah,
and you know, the last time I had like a total breakdown, but I don't know, it's difficult to unpick like what caused what, because I'd like lost a lot of weight and like lost my whole sense of self. Yeah. And this was about 10 years, probably longer than that, 15 years ago. I went through a really, really deep depression, and I was on antidepressants for quite a long time, and it got to the point where it wasn't working for me. And I said to the doctor doubled my dose, and he said, don't make any big decisions until you're well. And I sort of then realised I'm not going to get well until I make some big decisions. And I had to actually take myself out of an environment that was just stressing me out, that just I got to the point where I couldn't do it anymore. And it was having a job where, you know, had all these expectations on me where I just felt like I was failing, you know. So I quit the BBC actually at that point and stopped taking the antidepressants. And it was fine. And I don't recommend anyone does that, because I know you're not supposed to. Yeah. But for me, it was actually as much a combination of my brain chemistry as my circumstances, and, you know, being in the wrong environment for me and for my brain.
With the diagnosis, often, again, speaking to folk after they've been through that process, they describe a sense of acceptance and validation. Was that around for you, or has it been?
Yeah, I guess so, kind of. I mean, validation, as I said, the first feeling was like, I just sort of like wept and had this sort of incredible sadness for like, I felt really, I wanted to sort of hug my former self, you know, for going through all that time of feeling like it was a personal failing, all the things that I, you know, actually was really have done incredibly well considering, you know. So, but yeah, I mean, there is a degree of acceptance. There's a bit just now because it feels like it's everywhere, and I think there's a little bit of kind of backlash, and people are like, oh yeah, everyone's got ADHD, yeah, whatever. It's just, oh yeah, did you get, you know, diagnosed on TikTok or whatever, or yeah, oh, you went private. They're just like, it's a disgrace. Yeah. They're diagnosing anyone and everyone. I'm like, well, yes, you have got absolutely no idea of my lived experience, and so there, in some ways, I mean, I do talk about it on stage, and it is part of my show, but that's because I always talk about everything that's happening to me, and I can't help it. That's what I do. But there's a bit of me that's like, oh God, are people getting bored of this now? Are people fed up of hearing about, oh, not another comedian with ADHD, you know?
But there's I think there has been an explosion with the number of folk coming forward for assessments, and the NHS wasn't in a great place prior to lockdown.
Oh my
COVID.
God, it's absolutely
And
terrible.
post-COVID, it's just a complete nightmare to try and get help. But I guess for
I have actually been diagnosed both through the NHS and privately, because after going private, I got to the top of the waiting list, and I was told when I went private to stay on the waiting list.
Right.
Because, and I'm glad I did, because I couldn't get shared care and all that kind of thing. So
Shared care.
yeah, so I'm double diagnosed. That's what I like to say.
2 doses
So
of
I've
ADHD.
really got ADHD, like, no doubt about it.
She's got it really bad.
Yeah, I got it bad, baby. But yeah, no, I think that the problem is that it's not like suddenly everybody's getting ADHD. I think we've always had it. It's just that there's not been the recognition of it, and there's not been the support, and you know.
But
It's the same thing with menopause. It's sort of happening at the same time. Is a lack of understanding. I mean, it's absolutely shocking how poor healthcare is for women when they get into menopause or perimenopause. Even like the lack of understanding and just knowledge with your GP. One of my WhatsApp groups is all the girls. We're all the same age, all going through it, and everybody's gets told a different thing. You know, goes to the doctor and they say, have you tried yoga? And you're like, you have no idea how profoundly this is impacting my life, you know? And, you know, various, obviously there's, people got different ideas about HRT and all that.
Yeah.
And that, again, is not a magic cure for it either. But I can't remember the point I was going to make. But, the lack of resources to deal with this kind of explosion in diagnosis of ADHD is also at the same time a lack of resources for supporting women going through perimenopause and even just knowing what's going on, you know.
Do you think that there's a prejudice there, you know, folk who, because ADHD is a recognised condition, that there are national guidelines.
People don't believe it's a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, even within the NHS, they sometimes don't believe it.
Yeah, and it sort of feels like, it's just an excuse for lazy people. Like, my ADHD.
People with ADHD try
harder. Oh my
harder.
God, I really would love you to get inside my brain for a day, you know, and see what it's like. Yeah. So yeah, it's a funny thing, because I think there is still a bit of a sort of stigma around it. I don't know. It doesn't feel as legitimate as other medical conditions.
But it should be.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I think for many people, if they get the chance to...
It was like mental health in general, you know, like depression. People still don't really understand it. And they think, just cheer up, bloody hell.
No.
You know, it's...
What about your... I've checked out your Instagram and all your videos in there, which were very entertaining.
Total lack of consistency. Surprise. Yes, I said I'm going to share my journey going through this process of getting diagnosed and medication, and then did like 5 videos and then
is that right?
Lost interest.
But when you click on a video, you kind of wonder what's coming up this time.
That's very much what I'm thinking when I start recording.
You mentioned about one of the things you were hoping to get help with was procrastination.
Yeah.
Are you still stuck with that, or?
Yeah, of course I am. Of course I am.
Change
I mean, I have settled on, the medication I've settled on is dexamphetamine, so I take 10 milligrams. At one point I was prescribed 10 milligrams 3 times a day, but that was too much, because mostly the problem I had with that was when I was performing, the combination of having amphetamines and the adrenaline was actually really not pleasant at all. And it also gave me the medication gives me quite a dry mouth. Yeah. And so when you have a dry mouth on stage, people think you're nervous, and it really undermines your performance. So a bit of a balancing act. So I just take it actually I don't take it every day either, because I built up a tolerance to it really quickly. Right. So I try and take it when I need to really focus on some kind of work that I know I'm going to struggle to focus on.
Did you ever need medication when you were on stage though, beforehand?
What do you mean?
Because I would imagine that when you're on there, you're in the zone regardless.
Yeah. Oh no, I was fine. Before I realised I had ADHD, performing was like when I felt my best. Yeah. That's when I felt most focused. That's when I felt most calm. That's almost like why you become a comedian, because what else can you do? There's nothing else that makes you feel like that. Right. You know, it is the drug, that fixes you, because you're so in the moment and you're so focused, because the adrenaline, has that same kind of effect. So it didn't need medication to perform. No, that was the one thing that
Brilliant.
that worked.
Well, maybe that is why people with ADHD will gravitate towards the arts, because
and also gravitate towards risk taking and anything else where you're getting adrenaline, thrill seeking and risky behaviour generally.
And you spoke about talking about ADHD on stage. It's your sort of Gen X rated show. Was that actually influenced by your ADHD journey?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my solo shows are always based on whatever's going on in my life at that time. And so at the moment, the Gen X rated is about kind of realising, that the generation divide, like suddenly realising you're getting old, and like the gap between me and the youth of today. The very fact that I'm using that expression says a lot, doesn't it? So it's kind of that realization, and a lot of comedians my kind of age, a bit older, will kind of have a go at young people and go, these bloody young people, what are they like? It's not like back in the good old days, and like I really don't think that at all. I think that Gen X is a really toxic generation, with some really terrible ideas that have been baked into me that I'm trying to unlearn. So I'm trying to be better. I'm trying to learn from millennials and Gen Z. My son's Gen Z, and actually we've got Alpha, and now I think it's flipped into Beta now.
Is it?
Yes. Oh my God, time. So it's that, I'm in my late 40s. Obviously, you're very aware of the fact that you're now, you're aging, you're getting older, you're slipping out of relevance, all of those kind of things. So it's this general sense of what's going on in my life, but at the same time, discovering kind of that this major thing about yourself, the ADHD, and also my mum died, and that was a huge thing, so it's about all of that, really. Yeah.
And with your ADHD, in some ways, you were saying earlier there should be more to you, but the flip side of that is that perhaps ADHD has been the thing that actually has allowed you to move and.
Oh yeah, of course. I wouldn't be who I am without it. You know what I mean? It is who I am. But there's more to me than just ADHD, obviously. But at the same time, it is a big part of who I am and why I behave the way I behave and why I've done the things I've done and why I'm able to, be this version of myself. So you sort of have to embrace it for that. But yeah, it was interesting. Like after my mum died, I didn't have a great relationship with my mum. She was very critical and nothing was ever good enough. And after she died, I found these diaries of hers. And there's like a 5-year diary where it was like, January the 1st, and then it would have the year, and then underneath that the next year, and then the next year, and the next year. So you had like years worth of diaries, and I read through the whole thing, and I was like, oh my God, I think she probably had ADHD, and and I recognized so much of myself, and I'm like, oh, I think she was the way she was with me because she was trying to stop me from making the same mistakes that she made, and was desperately like, come on, you can do this, you can live up to your full potential, even though I've never felt like I did, and I always felt like I, could do so much more. And I feel really sad about that because I think if she'd have realized and I'd have realized, we would have been able to maybe connect, but, it's too late for that. However, I can sort of let go of any resentment or anger or whatever, and just have compassion, and that's another sort of major thing through the show, is just trying to have what I call radical compassion and understand that nobody sets out to be an arsehole. Everybody's just trying to do the best with the tools that they're given and based on the life experience that they've had, and we're all a product of that. And we have to understand that. It doesn't mean we need to accept or welcome in or tolerate people treating us badly, but we can have compassion for them. We can understand them, and instead of hating and being divisive, we can try and help where we can help, and understand from a distance where we can. We've
seen a lot of parents who will tell us that they see a lot of themselves in their children.
Yeah.
And it can pull at their emotional strings, and they try and direct them in a way that's different to what went before for them.
Exactly.
But they also recognise that can create problems in itself, because you're maybe stopping your child from being who they are.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. I think that's what happens, sadly. But hopefully, hopefully one of the benefits of getting a diagnosis is just the more you understand, the better. You know, the more insight you have, then you know you're making decisions with more information. You know, so you're going to make better decisions, and hopefully break these cycles when you can see them, when you can see the damage that's been done, and you can understand why it's happened, and you can stop it from happening. You know, with your children, or you know. And
we talk about developing systems and processes that lead to good habits. How is your journey with that, Julia?
Oh, I wish I was better, you know, and I see all the time on like social media, you know, these apps to help organise your day, and I think, that would probably be a good idea, but I don't know. I'm so resistant to it. I'm so resistant to it, because although routine is really helpful for me, because the problem I have is decision, you know, paralysis, and I find it really, the more options I have, the longer it's going to take me to do something, because I'm overthinking everything, and I have to think through every possible, you know, option. So I can't even remember what the question was. What was your question?
I'm just thinking about what you were saying there about having routine.
Oh yeah, right. So if you've got a routine, like for example, I became a vegetarian when I was 13, so I don't eat meat. So that just takes that out of the equation. So that's one less decision to make, and that works fine for me. You know, if I make rules for myself, I'm really good at sticking to them. Right. But I need to have the rule, because then it needs to make a decision. So
do you think too much routine, too many rules, would that detract from?
Yes, they also need to be my rules. If somebody tells me to do something, even if it was something that I want to do and I would have done up until, it's like, I want to go to the gym, and I recently, in the last year, I've been going to the gym, and it's been absolutely fantastic for me in every way, and I can't recommend it enough, and I can't believe that I'm saying that, because I was never that person, but I lift weights and I really enjoy it, and it's
what is so good about that?
It really suits an ADHD brain, because you sit and fanny about on your phone most of the time, and then you do short bursts of like really like intense workout, and then you just sit and wait and fanny about. So it feels like cheating, but actually you get a really good workout. And at my age, you need to be doing weight bearing exercise, you know. So
what's the term? What do you bench?
Yeah. Well, I don't use the barbell. I use just dumbbells. Right. So what would I bench, like 36?
I don't know what that means.
I don't know. I'm not competing with anyone else. I'm just competing with myself. And the thing is, I always thought that the gym was cardio, and find that so boring and so tedious. And running on a treadmill is the worst thing in the world, because it's painful and hard and boring. So if I can go to the gym and be there for an hour and a half and achieve a full workout, and I've seen the results, like I've seen, you know, my body changing. And I don't need to, I mean, I do some cardio, but I just do a little bit.
How much does that help with the ADHD exercise?
Having the routine, I think, helps, you know, because you feel a bit more in control when you set a goal and you stick to it. Because then you go, right, okay, if I can do that, I can do other things. Because when you are not achieving anything, then you can't achieve anything. You know what I mean? When you drop one ball, you drop all the balls. You know, I'm a sort of all or nothing kind of gal, that I'm like, right, I'm going to the gym, right, yes, I'm achieve, you know.
How often do you go?
Well, I try and go 3-4 times a week, but if I go 3 times, then I'm happy.
Cool. I went to CrossFit once or twice.
Oh no, I can't do classes.
It nearly killed me.
I'm very uncoordinated. This is another thing. I think I might be dyslexic, because
that's why I was telling you about all those wires.
I am extremely clumsy, and I've always been. That's been one of my personality traits, is my clumsiness.
Do you think you're clumsy because as you say, dyspraxia or developmental coordination disorder, or is it more inattention? You're just not seeing the things because you're not paying attention?
I don't know. I think it might be the former rather than the latter, because I do would just fall over, all the time.
Yeah.
My ankles were always going. I was always covered in bruises and scrapes as a child, and as an adult. And
did you walk into door frames and stuff?
Sometimes, but I really try. And I also have these really, really big shoes. I know they're my Spice Girl platforms, and it sounds, they're like medicine shoes because they anchor me.
Right. They get lead in them?
No, but they are quite heavy. And there's something about them that they help me to be a bit better at not sort of being sort of all over the place. I can't do classes like you're saying, CrossFit. I can't do that. It makes me so sad because I love dancing, and I always wanted to do those dance classes, MTV dance. But I cannot. My brain, I can't watch the instructor doing the move and do the move. I just can't. I just can't do it.
Right.
And I've always felt that's always made me feel really inadequate. So if I go to a class where I have to copy moves, it's just not for me. And that's just demoralizing, so that's bad. Right. Whereas in the gym, I'm doing a program that's my program that I can do and that I've been able to build upon. And so it's been really quite life-changing.
And I think that is so important, that to start off with something and being able to do it reinforces you repeating it.
Yeah, and like I said, I've got this kind of all or nothing mentality. I don't want to do it if I'm rubbish at it.
Yeah.
And with weights, the other thing about with weights is it reframes failure, because
what do you mean?
So when you're lifting weights, you have to train to failure. So you have to keep going.
Yeah.
You do as many reps as you can until you fail, but failure is success.
Yes.
So once you get to failure, that's when you have achieved what you need to achieve.
Right.
So it changes how you feel about failure. It's subtle, but I think it's actually quite important. And also going to the gym for myself and to get bigger, not to get smaller, because it was always like gym was to go and punish yourself with cardio to burn calories. That was always what I thought in the past. I've got, we could talk all day about, the issues that I have with food and eating. And I think that's another thing that goes hand in hand with ADHD.
Yep.
Quite a lot of people, women in particular with eating disorders, who have ADHD.
And do you know why there's that correlation?
I think it's dopamine. I think it's just using food to change how you feel.
Yeah.
And also probably overthinking everything. So getting obsessive about stuff is, classic.
You speak to women, I think women in particular.
And also living in the world that we live in.
Absolutely. You ask them, and they will often describe having a very poor sense of control about who they are, what they're about, the life led up to now, where it is and where is it going.
Impulse control,
And so you gravitate towards things you can control. And food might be one of them, because that might give you...
It's a double-edged thing. Because on the one hand, because I was a compulsive eater, a binge eater, and I would be eating with absolutely mindlessly, and couldn't stop myself.
Right.
So it was very out of control. It felt very out of control, and I still have a lot of food noise. Constantly on my mind. I'm constantly thinking about what I'm going to eat next. I'm like obsessed with food. I'm obsessed with food. I'm obsessed with clothes as well. But again, it's the variables. There's just a lot to think about.
Sure.
And both are sources of joy for me. Mm-hmm. So I love food.
Yeah.
And in fact, that's actually how I ended up realizing I had ADHD. Was I spoke to another comedian, Shapi Kirsandi actually. During a fringe, we were just having a chat, and she'd just recently been diagnosed with ADHD, and she was talking about that, and she was talking about some of the symptoms, and I was like, oh my God, I relate to everything that she's saying. And then she said about, having an eating disorder, and I was like, oh my God, me too. And she said that's apparently quite a common thing, co-occurrence.
Eating disorders, OCD, really up there in the mix, particularly women.
Yeah. So I completely get that. So yeah, that was the sort of trigger for me to then go off and have a look online. And then I looked at these, symptoms, and I was like, oh my God, check. And then, went to see about.
Do you think that there's a lot of people, and I've spoken to a number, where they'll say to me that, yeah, I know I've got ADHD and I don't need to have an assessment because it's not really...
Yeah, I've got quite a few friends like that, yeah. Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on that? Is it just horses for courses, whatever suits an individual?
Yeah, I think that you can still get some of the benefits of a diagnosis without getting diagnosed, which is if you are pretty convinced you've got ADHD, you know yourself well enough to be able to self-diagnose and then go, right, well, if I've got ADHD, if you're not really interested in trying medication, which a lot of people are not, and I think that's absolutely fair. I was just desperate and I was like, I need something. Do you know
most people who start medication won't continue with it?
Really?
Yeah.
That's interesting. So, I think if you can still, if you self-diagnose, go, right, okay, let's operate under the assumption that I do have ADHD. Now what? If medication is not something that I'm interested in trying, what else can I do? And can you, number one, stop being so unkind to myself and let myself, give myself a bit of a break here, but also try and put some systems in place to support yourself and not keep not keep punching yourself in the face by trying to do things that you can't do. It's like, I just was like, I'm going to get a cleaner because the amount of mental, because cleaning the house is just something I just could not get around to doing. And then there's the guilt and the shame and everything. And I was like, see if I actually I would rather pay that money because my time, of worrying about it but not doing anything about it, it would be better spent.
Is your cleaner good?
Yes, she is good.
And how has that helped your quality of life?
Oh, immensely. And it's not something that she comes every second week, and it just means I can't bear clutter and mess and all that kind of thing. I can't do anything if I'm surrounded by that. And when you're working from home, that's difficult. So I can keep surfaces clean, and I always kept a clean kitchen, but it's other things get out of control. And I'm sure you've heard this, the sort of doom piles and piles of stuff and piles of clothes and the floor covered in clothes and because my clothes are my obsession, I have a lot of clothes and getting dressed, I go through like 100 different variables before I find what I want to wear because I'm like, no, it's not quite right. And
And you put all the stuff straight back in the wardrobe that you don't wear?
No, of course I don't. It's the floordrobe, as they say. So yeah, piles and piles of stuff everywhere. But I just could sort of accepted, that's just, my bedroom's never going to be perfect. No. And when the cleaner comes, she sort of tidies everything up and... So it's manageable. The
number of teenagers that you see where they try something.
And I realise that's privilege, by the way, that I can afford a cleaner. And not everybody can do that. No. But there are some, there are things like that you can do. There's maybe sort of like, actually, if you balance it out for how much of your time, you actually are better spent.
Absolutely. I have this conversation all the time with folk. You're right that a lot of people can't afford these things, but if you can afford it, and I've even said about like a virtual PA to folk.
Yeah.
To do your emails for a couple of hours a week.
Yeah.
What difference would that make to you? Well, that would be amazing, but that's too expensive. How'd you get that? Well, no, it's actually not that expensive.
Well, with AI now, there's loads of AI is really a very helpful tool. For me, like we talked earlier at the beginning about that difficulty of starting things. Yeah. The blank page, it being the hardest thing. So sometimes I can use ChatGPT to do a first draft of something, and probably what I end up with is a million miles from that, but at least it's not a blank page. It's something to start with, and then you're in, But you
can look at it and go, well, that's rubbish. I'll change that. Oh, that's made me think of, I'll do that.
Yeah, and even if you go and completely rewrite, to be honest, that's what you want to be doing, because you don't really want to be relying on AI, but it's a helpful tool.
What's next for you then, Julia? What's on the horizon in terms of career, projects? I would love to be thriving, but I think surviving is first. What's next is I'm just trying to make it through. I'm just trying to be the best version of myself based on everything that's going on with me and not be too
hard on myself. I'm trying to do more stand-up because that is the thing I love the most. But unfortunately these days that requires being on social media and being good at that, and I'm just not good at being consistent and doing that kind of stuff because it's like, ugh.
Do you just
So I'm trying to do that. Yeah, I can be spontaneous, and if I get in a wee place where I'm like into it, then I can do loads. But if I'm not into it, I can't get around to doing it. So I need to do that. Yeah, trying to, I don't know, lower my expectations, which is like my mantra in life, lower your expectations, because then everything's better. But actually reframe sort of what success looks like, you know, at this stage in life, like what actually makes you happy, what actually do you want? You know, I think there's a lot of things that you're taught to want and taught to strive towards that are so shallow and so don't bring you, you know, any satisfaction or joy. And when you get to the stage in your life and you're sort of thinking, oh God, time is running out, you know, it does make you sort of pause and reflect and go, what's really important? And actually, I don't need a lot of the things that up to this point I've maybe thought I need to have, you know, and it's having, you know, being, you know, spending more time on relationships and doing the things that I really love doing, and not trying to force myself to be, you know, a round peg into a square hole, or the other way around. Actually, I guess it doesn't matter. And I think probably the diagnosis has helped me to move into that place a bit, but it's a slow process, isn't it, of trying to be enlightened and trying to be yourself.
It's a process, and that's the word that people with ADHD probably hate. That a process. No, I just want it now.
Yeah.
But if you can embrace
instant gratification, instant results.
If you can embrace the process and take incremental steps, you're more likely to get to where you want to be.
Yeah, but also it's that thing of like there is no destination.
No.
You know, it's like with weight loss, and I think that's a good metaphor for life generally. You know, I was always like, if I could just lose the weight, if I could just get to this number on the scales, then I'll be happy. And I did it, and I wasn't, because that's not how it works.
No.
And then, you know, and then I gained all the weight again, and then I was, you know, and so the cycle continues. And now I've sort of lost most of it again, but I'm in a place where I'm constantly cycling up and down, and I'm like, yeah, well, that's it. That's just life, you know. And it's not like I'm not dieting to get, because by this time next year I need to be this size. Well, for what? Why? You know, for what? You know, for an event. Life is the event. Every minute is just as long as every other minute, and every minute is just as important as every other minute. And so you need to kind of just be present and be in the moment, and try and realize that if I'm going to the gym, I'm not going to the gym to punish myself to get thin so that on this date, you know, I'll be fitting into this dress. Like, that's ridiculous. I need to go to the gym because I enjoy being at the gym. I enjoy how it makes me feel, and I enjoy, my life is enhanced by doing that.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, this is it. Absolutely. We're living it, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I've come to the end. So I'd like to thank you ever so much, Julia, for coming and speaking with it. You've been amazing in terms of how open and upfront you've been about your experience.
Far too open. I'll tell everyone everything.
I'll edit that out. Right, okay. No, I think a lot of people, you know, in their journey of ADHD, often question themselves about, you know, do I have ADHD? That's ridiculous, which is a word that's used all the time. That's ridiculous. And I think just hearing your experiences of ADHD can hopefully help others, you know, take the plunge and go forward for assessment, whether it's NHS or whatever. Because I think for many people, just understanding that actually that is what it's about can help them, you know, move forward. And
just be happier, and just have a better quality of life, you know?
100%.
And that's the most important thing, isn't it?
100%. Right.
Bye.
Thanks for listening, and until the next time, bye for now.